welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 456, and today's date is September 1st, 2014. And for those people who are celebrating Labor Day today, happy Labor Day to you. And the title of this report is False Flag Warning. Expert reports imminent ISIS threat to the U.S. power grid. Now, we can see the government officials are out there. They're continually pushing the propaganda that the Islamic State is coming to the United States. Obama is out there saying, no, we're not going to attack Syria, and this is working perfectly right into their story, because what they want to do is they want the people of the United States to beg to go into Syria, and of course, who's waiting on the other side? We have Russia and China, and this is going to cause all types of problems, which would be a world war. Now, we also have the situation going on in Ukraine. There's a lot of propaganda coming out of there, trying to convince everyone that Russia has invaded, and Ukraine is out there taking all different type of precautions because of this invasion, maneuvering troops. And again, this is all propaganda, and we're going to get into that a little bit later in this report. But let's start out with the economic collapse news. And what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a huge slowdown in the economy in Europe, in UK, and it really is spreading. And of course, as we know, most of the countries are in a recession/depression. Unemployment very, very high. Debt levels cannot be sustained, and we can see that each one of these countries is really reeling from what is going on there, and the people are upset. The governments have no alternative but to follow the U.S. into war, and we can see right now in the UK, manufacturing growth is slowing down. Surveys of the nation's manufacturing sector saw an unexpected fall this August as Purchasing Managers Index PMI figures dropped from 54.8 to 52.5. The survey pointed to a broad slowdown that is underway in the UK's manufacturing sector. This is according to Market. So we can see right now that UK is slowing down. Germany, they are losing momentum. GDP drops 0.2%. Actually, the factory output in Europe is pretty much declining. July, new orders dwindled. Despite Eurozone manufacturers barely raising their prices, growth in the region slowed slightly more than initially thought. Eurozone factories stumbled with the final August PMI at 50.7, the lowest in over a year, as new orders slowed. So we can see right now they're all feeling the effect of this recession/depression. It is spreading, and it's going to continually spread. Now, here in the States, it's a little different because we have a printing press. We have manipulation. It's much harder to see exactly what's going on. Of course, they're keeping all eyes on the stock market, making everyone look over there to think, to make everyone believe that we're in this type of an illusion. Unemployment's coming down. And they're continually out there with the propaganda that real estate is fine, it's recovering. They make all these different types of excuses that real estate is doing well. They say retail is doing well, but we're looking at the real economic indicators, and we're seeing the total opposite right now. And a lot of countries right now are maneuvering and stepping away from the U.S. dollar because they see that the dollar is in decline. It's collapsing. They see what's going on. And right now, Ecuador, they are planning to create the world's first digital currency issued by the country's central bank in what is seen by many as a step to abandon the dollar right now. The currency is expected to start circulating in December, according to the country's central bank. The new currency is expected to coexist with the U.S. dollar. Some specialists also regard the move as a step towards giving up the U.S. dollar. Now, we can see a lot of countries are starting to do this. They're stepping away. We know that Russia and China, they are completely moving away from everything Western because they realize what is on the table here, and that is war, that is more economic sanctions, which will lead to war, and they're protecting themselves with food, with their economy, with oil, and every other BRIC nation is pretty much doing the same thing right now. And the Western world, they're gearing up for war. NATO troops are moving. Military assets are being put into position. The United States, all you hear from our government officials is war. War here, war there, war here. That's it. That's all you hear. And of course, all they do is give ultimatums to the other side. And it's funny, and I mentioned this once before, My son was watching Star Wars, and I tell you, it is just like a Sith where they see things in black and white. It's ultimatums: do it this way, do it this way, and we can see they're doing the same exact thing. Obama's out there. He never asks for peace. He never says, let's sit down and discuss this. He only has an ultimatum: stop doing this. Even if you're not doing it, just stop doing it. And we know you're not doing anything, but just stop. Poroshenko, ceasefire. Yes, we will have this ceasefire as long as you lay down your weapons. You give up. You allow us to arrest you. Netanyahu does the same thing. Ceasefire. Get rid of all your weapons. We'll be in control. It's the same exact talk from every single place. Now here in the United States, we see Obamacare, and of course this is completely developed to pretty much build revenue from all these hidden taxes inside of Obamacare. The one that we definitely see is the penalty on those people who don't take Obamacare, and there was a penalty for businesses, but they had to get rid of that right now because they saw that this was hurting the economy a lot more than actually helping it. But there are many different taxes within it. There's a lot of things that people don't realize, especially with Medicaid and what's coming out. And each state is different in this. And something called Medi-Cal, which is in California, there is a clawback provision for recovery of costs incurred by the state to provide medical care. While there is much variation in particulars from one state to another, the bottom line is that these costs include a monthly administration fee. The clawback mechanism functions via the state placing liens on individual assets at the point the Medicaid recipient reaches age 55, then recovers the money at the point the Medicaid recipient dies by seizing the money from the estate. Under California law, now every state has their own, but it's pretty much the same. Under California law recovery rules, $611 per month for 10 years, so age 55 to 64 amounts to about $73,320, which is the minimum that would come from the estate. Those signing up thinking Medicaid is free better learn the rules and understand this. And when we sign up with, of course, with this Affordable Care Act, there are so many different taxes intertwined, so many penalties, so many things that people don't realize that, you know, they'll take your parents' house, they'll drain the bank accounts, they don't care, they just want your money. And again, if the government officials were going to truly give something to the people to help them in health benefits, first, every single one of them should have sat down in front of the computer and taken it themselves, but of course they exempted themselves and they didn't go ahead and do that. Second of all, when they were passing the bill, they said you have to pass it to read it and all these other things that they were talking about, and of course no one read this, no one understood it, no one realized what it was, and now here it is, and it is failing, of course, but there are still people that are taking it and using it, but what they wanted it to do is not working out because they thought the youth of America was going to buy health insurance, which would support the older people, because what they did is they raised all the premiums. The premiums continually go higher and higher. They're not coming down. And what we're seeing is that the youth of America, they're not purchasing it, and they're running into a huge, huge problem. And this is why we see businesses not imposing penalties. Businesses now are cutting people's hours. They're making them go from full to part-time job, and they're doing everything to get around Obamacare. Now, it seems like the border crisis is continuing, where illegals are coming over, and right now what's happening is when they send them back, there's a new law in California letting everyone know that, you know what, you can come back to America. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security is expected to allow thousands of illegal immigrants deportees to return to the U.S. so long as they have ties to Southern California. Taxpayers will additionally fund a media campaign in Mexico alerting deportees that they may be eligible to come back to the United States. Under the settlement, Border Patrol agents will be required to inform illegal immigrants of their right to fight deportation in the U.S. court system. Agents also must provide them access to informational hotline and list of free legal service providers. Many believe the agreement will soon be adopted by areas around the nation. So we can see right now that they're going to continually bring in these illegals. Even when they deport them, they're going to bring them right back, and they're spreading them out across the nation into all these different cities. And of course, they're doing this for a specific reason, a purpose, an agenda that they have. And part of the agenda, we understand, is to get them onto Obamacare, to get them work permits, have them come in here. And of course, these are teenagers, so they're at the ripe age to go to war or to take place of those people who are going to war to work in those jobs. I mean, there's just so many different things they can be using these people for, and it seems like there's even more to the agenda than we know just right now. Now, it looks like if you use Facebook, the U.S. government can brand you a terrorist based on your posts. The watch list tracks down known and suspected terrorists and includes both foreigners and Americans. It is also based on loose standards and secret evidence, which ensnares innocent people. Indeed, the standards are so low that the U.S. government's guidelines specifically allow for a single, uncorroborated source of information, including a Facebook or Twitter post, to serve as the basis for placing you on its master watch list, which is absolutely ridiculous. But actually, when you think about it, our government officials really don't use proof or anything for anything that they do. I mean, look, as soon as the downing of the MH17, they just went ahead and blamed it on Russia. Now we're finding out that Russia had nothing to do with it. And of course, there was no evidence gathering. There was no proof or anything like that. What they're doing here is they're infiltrating all these social media sites, taking all this information, and if you mention certain things, you're just placed on the list. It doesn't matter how you get on there. You can't get off. You'll never know if you're on it. The only time you will know is when they come knocking at your door or breaking down your door when the collapse occurs. And we can see right now that they're just placing as many people as they possibly can. They look through the data, they correlate the data, and you just go on the list. And of course, this is for the collapse. They are scared, they are nervous, because they want to know who those people are that are going to be a threat to their authority. And this is why they've been creating it. This is why the NSA has been spying on the American people. This is why DHS has the Fusion Center. And this is why DHS has been created. Okay, let's move on to Ebola. And there's a lot of very interesting things coming out about Ebola. And I'm not just talking about the virus and the cure, but things are very odd. And I did a little bit of research, and I'm starting to realize, and I've mentioned this before, that wherever China is in Africa, that's where these Ebola breakouts are happening. The economies in each one of these countries is starting to fail. They're having major amounts of problems because business people don't want to come into this area. But right now, the officials from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, in the U.S. are in talks with health officials in Nigeria about the prospects for conducting a Phase 1 safety study of the Ebola vaccine among healthy adults in Nigeria. The experimental vaccine is expected to first be given to 3 healthy human volunteers to see if they suffer any adverse effects. If deemed safe, it will then be given to another small group of volunteers, ages 18 to 50, to see if it produces a strong immune response to the virus. Now, this is all well and good, and they're doing this in Nigeria. Of course, this is where the U.S. government would love to get in there, because what we're seeing in this area of West Africa, and it's amazing how it aligns so perfectly. Now, we understand the playbook of the United States central bankers is to pretty much push terrorism in each one of these countries, to have these countries say, oh, we need your help, please bring in the troops. And all of a sudden they have this little skirmish and a war. China's on one side, the U.S. is on the other, and this continues in each one of these different countries in West Africa. But when you take this information and you match it up with the Ebola virus, it matches up pretty darn good. Now, there have been major oil discoveries in each one of these countries: Liberia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Senegal. And if you look at this is ranging from 2012 all the way up to 2014. Each one of these discoveries is using an outside oil company not part of the United States, like PetroChina. There's one from Italy. There's Lukoil. There's Russian oil companies. And it seems like that it matches perfectly with all of these countries. Now, the discovery in Liberia was in 2012. And in New Guinea, it was 2012. Sierra Leone, 2012. And then Guinea Bissau in 2013, Senegal in 2013, Sierra Leone in 2013, and it goes on. There was another one in Senegal in 2013, and this goes on. And what we're seeing is that in Gabon, there is another oil discovery by an Italian firm has made a natural gas discovery. It is huge. There's also one in Angola, which is right there, and we see that analysis say Angola's Africa's #2 oil producer could double its oil reserves, which are currently estimated at just under 13 billion barrels. There seems to be one made in the Congo by an Israeli billionaire. Company owned by Dan Gertler discovered crude oil around the Lake Albert on Congo's eastern border of Uganda. And what we're going to see is all of these countries right now, we're going to see the Ebola virus spread, because we're already seeing it. Congo just reported they have a different strain of Ebola in that area. Sierra Leone, Angola, Liberia, all these different places. Nigeria has a huge amount of oil that was just discovered. 4 new oil reserves discovered in Nigeria. So we can see right now, wherever Ebola is, it's the same places where they found all these new oil deposits. Is this a coincidence? I really don't think so. I think this was done on purpose. I think, hey, you know what? If we can't get our troops into each one of these countries, let's cause havoc on the economy. Let's get rid of most of the people there. Let's spread this virus so the United States central bankers can come down and help out in this region. And of course, eventually, by weeding out the people, by scaring off everyone, they can swoop in a little bit later, and guess what? They can take all the oil, and this is exactly what it looks like they are doing. Now, it looks like they are bringing North Korea into the fold, and like I've always said, the players are always the same. It's going to be Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Syria, and other BRIC nations. And right now, the White House said on Monday it was continuing to do all that it can do to secure the release of the 3 Americans detained in North Korea. How coincidental that they're just bringing this out right now out of everything that's going on in Ukraine, in the Middle East. They brought in North Korea with 3 people that are being held captive. Securing the release of the U.S. citizen is a top priority, and we have followed these cases closely in the White House. We continue to do all we can to secure their earliest possible release, coming from a government official. Now, Russia is out there, and they are demanding information on MH17. The data from the black boxes should be published already, says Russian Deputy Defense Minister, saying that the Boeing catastrophe throws up more and more questions. Russia is demanding to know why international investigators have yet to publish the black box data from a Malaysian airliner that was shot down over eastern Ukraine. And right now, the Dutch Safety Board said on August 11th that they were going to announce a preliminary report, and get all the facts out there. And as of August 25th, the Dutch government has refused to release the recordings at all. And we know that they've created this board of different states where the information is going to say confidential. If any one of the states wants to release it, another one can veto it so it doesn't get out there. This is what we call a cover-up, because they don't want the real information out there, because it would then bring in the U.S., the puppet regime in Kiev, and other nations that this was done on purpose, and there would be an outcry of the people of the world saying, oh my God, I can't believe they did this. They're the evil ones, and they don't want this out. Australia right now is imposing more sanctions. The Australian government on Monday unveiled further sanctions against Russia, oil and gas, financial and defense sectors. Under the new sanctions, there will be no new arms exports and no exports for the oil and gas industry. This is coming from Prime Minister Tony Abbott. In addition, Russia's state-run banks are not allowed new access to Australian capital markets, and there will be no new trade and investment in Crimea. The fresh sanctions will affect a further 63 Russian and Ukrainian individuals and 21 organizations and businesses. So we can see they're continually pushing the sanctions. Europe is also pushing more sanctions. Europeans could be barred from buying new Russian government bonds under a package of extra sanctions. Europe's 7-day ultimatum for Kremlin to de-escalate counts down starting now. They're giving Russia 7 days to stop what they're doing, which is absolutely nothing. So you can see right now what they're saying is they want Putin to talk to the southeastern people to stop what they're doing. This is what they're really saying, but they can't come out and say that. So what are we seeing right now? Kiev will not have any type of substantial dialogue with the southeast Ukrainians at all. They will not even talk to them. There is no peace. The only thing Poroshenko continually says is lay down your weapons and surrender. And we'll take those leaders, put them in prison, and then we'll take the southeastern section and bring them back into the fold of Ukraine. But what's happening in Ukraine is that things are really starting to fall apart. People are rioting. They want Poroshenko to resign. They don't want him in power anymore. The southeastern section is making a huge amount of gains against the Ukrainians. They don't want to fight. The people's hearts, it's not in it. And they're losing the battle, and this is why we're seeing all this, because what they need is more troops, they need more weapons, and this is why we're seeing a lot of this propaganda. Now, what's funny about this is that the people are protesting and rioting in the streets in Ukraine, but the United States government and the corporate media reports on nothing about this. But think back when they had the coup d'etat, it was all over the corporate media convincing everyone this was a natural uprising. No, the natural uprising's happening right now, but they don't want to cover it because that would pretty much screw themselves, because they're the ones saying that the people have the right to decide who their leaders are going to be, except when the United States central bankers control the puppet regime. Then the people do not have the rights. Now, Ukraine is still trying to join NATO, and the Czech Prime Minister is out there saying, listen, you can't join NATO if you're in this battle and you have a civil war going on. You just can't do it. And of course, Yatsenyuk is out there saying, yeah, we don't see a problem with this. I'm going to introduce the bill anyhow, because even if we have this thing going on with the southeastern section, it makes no difference. We can still join NATO. And he's still going ahead and doing it. The Red Cross right now is looking to form a commission to establish instances of war crimes in Ukraine for white phosphorus and other things going on there. So the Red Cross is leading up the investigation. And of course, what has happened over this weekend? Poroshenko decided to release those 10 paratroopers, and they're allowed to go back to Russia. Now, this is very interesting because, of course, on the corporate media and the U.S. government, they said that Russia was invading. They've captured 10 men. It was a special ops team. And why would they return them if there is an invasion going on right now? It makes no sense whatsoever. These were soldiers that were lost, and if you look at the videos and you look at the photographs of where they were no boundary lines whatsoever. There were just fields. You can walk over back and forth. Actually, the Ukrainians and Russians, they do meet at a certain point. There's no barriers. There's no soldiers. There's nothing, and they just talk and then they go back along their merry way. But it's all over the corporate media that Ukraine is invading, and we have to ask ourselves a question. If Ukraine is truly invading, why doesn't NATO, the U.S., Ukraine position their satellites over this area and give us that high-res HD zoom in of all the troops that are there? We can see their insignias from these satellite photos. Don't give us those blurred black and whites, you know, those satellite images from the 70s. We don't want those. We know they're clear, colorful satellite images. I had one on the Sentinel alerts. It's still there. You can see when you zoom in pretty much everything, and that was in 2011, and now we're in 2014. The reason why they're making a big deal like this and they're screaming and yelling is because they want to bring in weapons. They want forces to come in. They want to join NATO because they're losing the battle, and they're very nervous right now that they're going to lose Ukraine. Russia, and this is what is going on right now. Russia shifted to full-scale invasion of Donbass, and this is coming from Ukraine. Ukraine halts attempts to dislodge rebels. Ukraine shifts focus to halting Russian invasion. Early this morning, U.S. Senator Bob Menendez said he has no doubt Russia has invaded Ukraine. Well, excuse me, Mr. Senator. When you say you have no doubt, you have the satellite images, and I'm not talking about those black and white blurred ones. I'm talking about clear images that actually show the troops coming in to Ukraine. That is the proof. Don't say you have no doubt. I hate when all these people just throw out all this information but back it up with no evidence whatsoever. And of course, what's out there, and what does Menendez say right after? Ukraine needs assistance from EU and US. Yes, they need armed forces because they're losing the battle against the southeastern section, and they have a lot of soldiers that are deserting right now. Putin opened up a safe passage for these soldiers to get through who are deserting, and the entire system is falling apart, and this is why they're making a very big push. Now the question is, and everyone's out there, yes, Russia's invading, Russia's invading. If Russia was truly invading, and this is coming out of Information Clearinghouse, and they put together what an invasion would actually look like from previous invasions of all different other countries, and especially with Ukraine right now. They're very weak, and it's very easy to pretty much decimate them. But let's look at what a real invasion would look like, because we can see from the U.S. what they do before they're going to go into like Syria, Iraq, and all the other places. Ukrainian artillery fell silent almost immediately. They are no longer shelling residential districts of Donetsk and Lugansk. This is because their locations have been pinpointed prior to the operation, and by Thursday afternoon they were completely wiped out using air attacks, artillery, and ground-based rocket fire. The look of military activity on the ground in Donetsk and Lugansk has changed dramatically. Whereas before it involved small groups of resistant fighters, the Russians operate in battalions of 400 men and dozens of armored vehicles, followed by convoys of support vehicles, tanker trucks, communication, field kitchens, field hospitals, and so on. The flow of vehicles in and out is nonstop, plainly visible on air reconnaissance or satellite photos, and believe me, they would be posting these all over the place because they would say, see, they are invading. But they don't have them. There's no proof. The Ukrainian military has promptly vanished. Soldiers and officers alike have taken off their uniforms, abandoned their weapons, and are doing their best to blend in with the locals. There are Russian checkpoints everywhere. Local civilians are allowed through, but everyone associated with the government, foreign or domestic, is detained for questioning. Most of the Ukraine's border crossings are by now under Russian control. Some have been reinforced with air defense and artillery systems and tank battalions to dissuade NATO forces from attempting to stage an invasion. Civilians and humanitarian goods are allowed through. Russia has imposed a no-fly zone over all of Ukraine. What does the United States do before they do anything? They implement a no-fly zone over Libya, over Yemen, over Iraq, and now over Syria. We would see a no-fly zone. All civilian flights have been canceled. There is quite a crowd of U.S. State Department staffers, CIA and Mossad agents, and Western NGO people stuck at Borispol Airport in Kiev. Some are nervously calling everyone they know on their satellite phones. Western politicians are demanding that they be evacuated immediately. The usual Ukrainian talking heads, such as President Poroshenko, Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, and others, are no longer available to be interviewed by Western media. Nobody quite knows where they are. Rumors are they escaped and they're out of the country already. Some of over 800,000 Ukrainian refugees are starting to stream back in from Russia. They were living in 10 cities, many of them in the nearby Rostov region, but with winter coming, they're eager to get back to their homes. There is all sorts of intense diplomatic and military activity around the world, especially in Europe, and the U.S. military forces are on highest alert. Diplomats are jetting around and holding conferences. President Obama just held a press conference to announce that we don't have a strategy on Ukraine yet. Kiev has surrendered. There are Russian tanks on the Maidan Square. Russian infantry is mopping up the remains of Ukraine's National Guard. A curfew has been announced. The operation to take Kiev resembles shock and awe in Baghdad, a few loud bangs, and then a whimper. So if there was truly an invasion by Russia, this is what it would look like. Are you seeing this? Are you hearing reports about this? Absolutely no. And you're trying to tell me there's a full-fledged invasion in Ukraine and they're letting commuter planes fly right over it? Unrealistic. They are lying. It's propaganda. It's fake. It's phony. They're doing it to bring NATO in, to bring military assets, more forces, because they're losing the battle. They're losing Ukraine. It's falling apart. Now out to Libya. Now Libya, the militias are taking over the country. The tribes, I should say, are taking over the country. They have captured a U.S. embassy compound in Libya. And what we're seeing right now is that Libya has fallen. And we're going to see all of a sudden all different ways of trying to get back into Libya. We're going to see other countries start to make more bombing runs. We're going to see the United States more talks about how we're going to get into Libya, and this all could be from the event that's going to occur. Like I said, all these Middle Eastern countries, they are losing one by one, and it is completely falling apart at this time. Now, a couple of reports ago, I talked about a tanker that was off the coast of Texas, where they had illegal oil there, and that ship is still floating around. They can't get anyone to buy this oil. They're not allowed within the United States boundaries, or forces will board the ship coming down from a court order from a judge. But what's very interesting, when the tribes in Libya decided to set sail with oil, we had the Navy SEALs jump on that ship and bring it right back. Here we have a ship that's floating around, going all over the place, with 95% full of oil from Iraq. Baghdad is still saying this is illegal. And why don't the Navy SEALs just take it and bring it back to Iraq? Because this is part of the black market. This is why they're continually letting it go wherever it wants, because they will sell it using the U.S. dollar, and it will go back to fund the Islamic State. This is exactly what is happening right now. It's a complete cover-up. Now, it looks like Germany will be supplying weapons to the Kurds. The delivery is planned. They will first arm the larger troops of around 4,000 soldiers, and then the personal protection of soldiers will be achieved. For example, helmet, body protection, glasses. They're bringing in 3 bazookas, 800 G3 and G36 assault rifles with ammunition, as well as 5 heavily armored Dingo infantry vehicles. The equipment will also include hand grenades, mine clearing, night vision goggles, field kitchens, and tents. So they're bringing this all into Iraq. They're also saying that, of course, there are people from Germany fighting with the Islamic State. It seems like all countries are in, and we can see they're all making a case that they're going to be part of this event, because all these people are going to be coming back to the United States, to the UK, to France, to Italy, to all these places, and we will see a cascading event across Europe and then eventually to the United States. They're going for everything right now because they realize the dollar's collapsing. There's nothing left. This has to be the main event so they can start this war. Now, it looks like hackers have launched an all-out assault on Norway's oil and gas industry in what is being billed as the largest ever coordinated cyber attack in Norway. Hackers have targeted some 300 different firms within the country's oil energy industry. But what's very interesting about this is that Statoil has been pursuing partnership with Russia oil company Rosneft. Just last week, Statoil officials announced that the Norwegian firm will stand by this arrangement, which includes a joint exploration mission in Norway's Barents Sea, even as tensions between Russia and the West continue to escalate. So who do you think attacked the oil and gas industry in Norway? I think they're sending a message: do not work with Russia at this time. Now, it seems that Americans right now have been voting in this YouGov poll. Now, I don't know if this poll is fixed. Most of them are. They're fixed, they're fake, and it's to get people to think that, yes, this is the way the trend is going. And what they're saying, back in 2013, most of the people, about 62%, pretty much opposed going into Syria. But 1 year later, and here we are again in the same exact time frame, 63% of Americans now are backing an invasion of Syria to get the Islamic State. So I ran a poll here on X22 Report. Now, I know a lot of people listen to me, and not everybody, a lot of people agree, but the poll results came back. It says 86% said no, we should not go in, and 14% said yes, we should. So we're getting an opposite reading of what YouGov is getting, and I just cannot believe that people want an invasion. But the only way I can see this is working is they're trying to convince everyone that there is a terrorist threat. People are nervous, they're scared, and their new strategy is working, because this is exactly what they want. They tried this last year. It didn't work out because they could care less if Assad gassed his own people. They said that was an internal problem. But anything where they say that the Islamic State could commit terror here is a completely different story, and it seems like they're getting what they want. They're going to use it even if it's made up, and they're going to push that agenda. Now, it looks like all these beheading videos are going to come to an end, because the Islamic State says, you know what, we're cracking down on social media, and we don't want to put out beheading videos anymore unless they have strict permission from the leaders. So they're going to not use these anymore. And what the real reason is because we're starting to realize that most of these are all fake. They're used as propaganda. They're false flags to make it seem like, oh, look, they're killing someone, and this is why they're stopping it. And of course, all of a sudden, they're putting up a ban like, oh, no, you got to get special permission to behead someone to have on social media, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, the government officials, they are out there in full force saying that we have the Islamic State coming back to the U.S., UK. They are completely untraceable. We have no idea where they are. Mike Rogers is out there. David Cameron's out there. Everyone is out there telling you that there are Islamic State militants someplace in our country. We don't know where. Our intelligence isn't really good because we have it focused on spying on the people and not the real. Now, what's really happening is they're building up the terror effect to make you think that everyone is inside the country already. They're already set to go, and really it's an inside job. And we've been talking about this for so long, and we can see they're pushing this very, very hard right now. And of course, I've been talking about the power grid going down, the financial institutions going down, and now we have the experts out there saying that ISIS terrorists pose an imminent threat to the U.S. electric grid, with the capacity to coordinate a devastating assault on our nation's infrastructure, warned a leading homeland security and terrorism expert, Dr. Peter Pry, a former CIA officer. He is executive director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security and director of the U.S. Nuclear Strategy Forum. Pry recalled a leaked U.S. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission report divulged this past March that coordinates terrorist attacks on just 9 of the nation's 55,000 electrical substations, could provoke coast-to-coast blackouts for up to 18 months. Such an attack would mirror the devastating impact of an electromagnetic pulse attack without the need for any nuclear device or delivery system. That means that ISIS doesn't have to actually come to the United States on those U.S. passports. They can come right over the border, sneak in, see how they're playing this up, and they can be set and ready to go to bring down the power grid. And we saw in California a dry run of people using a physical attack on a power grid system, and they brought it down. Pry also warned of a rogue nations such as Iran and North Korea, let's bring them into the picture, passing ISIS a nuclear device and delivery system such as a Scud missile to launch an actual EMP attack. So they're bringing everyone into the mix right now because we're heading into fall. They really need to ramp this up. The system is collapsing. They need to make sure that their story is straight when the event occurs. They gotta have those countries they're going to blame this on, and we can see they're just ramping this up, getting ready to do it. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.